In the quaint town of Meadowgrove, nestled in the heart of Pennsylvania, there stood an old abandoned mill. The mill had been a staple of the town's economy in the late 19th century, but it had long since fallen into disrepair. The locals whispered tales of the mill being haunted, and few dared to venture near it, especially after dark. The mill's history was steeped in tragedy. In 1895, a terrible accident claimed the lives of several workers. The machinery malfunctioned and a fire broke out, trapping many inside. The screams of the dying workers echoed through the night, and the mill was never the same again. The owner, a man named Samuel Hargrove, was so distraught by the tragedy that he took his own life shortly after. Years passed, and the mill remained untouched, a grim reminder of the past. The townsfolk avoided it, and the stories of ghostly apparitions and eerie noises only grew more vivid with each retelling. In the summer of 2005, a group of teenagers decided to explore the old mill. They were curious and skeptical, believing the stories to be nothing more than local folklore. Among them was Emily, a bright and adventurous 17-year-old who had recently moved to Meadowgrove with her family. One evening, as the sun began to set, Emily and her friends Jake, Sarah, and Matt made their way to the mill. The air was thick with the scent of decaying wood and the faint smell of old machinery. As they approached the entrance, they could feel a chill run down their spines. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Come on, it's just an old building," Jake replied, trying to sound braver than he felt. They stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The mill was eerily silent, except for the occasional creak of the old wooden beams. They explored the ground floor, finding nothing but dust and cobwebs. As they ventured deeper into the mill, they began to hear strange noises, whispers and faint cries that seemed to come from nowhere. Emily felt a cold breeze brush past her, and she shivered. "Did you hear that?" Matt asked, his eyes wide with fear. "It's just the wind," Jake insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. They continued to explore, their curiosity overpowering their fear. They climbed the rickety stairs to the second floor, where the machinery was still intact. The air was thick with the smell of oil and rust. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the mill. The teenagers froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The footsteps grew louder, and they could feel the vibrations through the floorboards. "We should get out of here," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. But it was too late. The footsteps stopped, and a figure materialized in the darkness. It was a man dressed in old-fashioned clothes, his face contorted in anguish. He looked directly at the teenagers, his eyes filled with a haunting sadness. "Samuel Hargrove," Emily whispered, recognizing the man from the stories. The figure began to speak, his voice a chilling echo. "Leave this place," he warned. "It is not safe for the living." The teenagers didn't need to be told twice. They turned and ran, their footsteps echoing through the mill as they fled. They didn't stop until they were far away from the old building, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. As they caught their breath, they looked back at the mill. The figure of Samuel Hargrove stood at the entrance, watching them with a sorrowful gaze. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he vanished. The teenagers never spoke of that night again, but the memory of the old mill and the ghostly figure of Samuel Hargrove haunted them for the rest of their lives. The mill remained abandoned, a silent witness to the tragedy that had occurred within its walls. And so, the legend of the haunted mill continued to be whispered among the townsfolk of Meadowgrove, a chilling reminder of the past that refused to be forgotten.